What did the Buddhist say to the hot dog vendor? He said, "Make me one with everything."
You know, it's interesting, when you look back 20 years ago, we had Johnny Cash, Bob Hope, and Steve Jobs, and now we're without Cash, without Jobs, and without Hope, and I'm sure hoping that Kevin Bacon doesn't die.
So why did the sitcom about airplanes never take off? Because the pilot was terrible.
So I was talking to my Uncle Bob the other day, and he comes up with the perfect invention for the perfect lawn. He goes to the brewery, he gets all of this beer, he puts it all over his lawn, and the best part, he says, is when the grass starts to grow, it comes up half cut.
Hi, I'm Scott McKean, and I am thrilled to be here on behalf of Council and Mayor Don Iveson to wish the organizers of this year's Comedy Fest all the best. And you know, I have to do that often. I have to say on behalf of Mayor Don Iveson. And I sit next to the mayor at all our formal council meetings. And you know, Don, he's tall, he's a good-looking man, he's young. I'm not that happy having to sit next to Don Iveson all the time. Relative to him, I look like one of those Muppet cranky guys or something. It's horrible. But then people will say to me, "Oh, but you're the best dressed councillor, so that's a good thing, right?" That's great, but you know, corpses are well dressed too.
Okay, what do you call an alligator in a vest? An investigator.
So Donald Trump and Rob Ford were out having a few drinks one night at Atlantic City, and they were walking home. Of course, they don't drink and drive. They're walking home and came across a park bench, and underneath the park bench was a dog, leashed to the bench itself, but the dog was, of course, lonely and licking itself, and as dogs do. Now, both just slightly inebriated, Donald looks at Rob and says, hey, Rob, what do you think of that?" He says, "I sure wish I could do that." And of course, Rob Ford looks at it and says, Don, don't you think you should pet him first?"
What's blue and smells like red paint? Blue paint.
Okay, so just to summarize, Nate Line's almost ready to open. We should be on schedule. Awesome. So we're going to be opening right in 2019. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Have a great day. So why shouldn't you vote for politicians during elections? Well, because all it does is encourage us to keep doing what we're doing.
Oh, you're feeling a bit chilly? Why don't you go stand in the corner? They're usually about 90 degrees.
Recently in Canada, we hosted an International Fire Chiefs Conference, and three close friends that I have globally attended and contacted me, said, "Ken, is there any way that we could get together and could you organize a hunt for us?" We'd had a fresh snowfall and it was quite foggy. You know, they played cards for a couple of hours that first morning, got quite bored with it. The Norwegian chief looked out the window and the fog had started to lift, and he said, I think it's clear enough. I'm going to take my rifle and go for a walk and see what I see. Well, about a half an hour later, he returned and he was so excited. He had bagged an 8-point buck. The Australian and the Texan were also excited, and you know, they said, "Well, where did you go? How did you get that beautiful deer so quickly?" And he said, "Well, it was quite easy. I walked out of the cabin about 200 yards, come across some tracks in the fresh snow and followed them, and there he was." So the Australian said, "Well, I have to go." So he grabbed his rifle and away he went. And wouldn't you know, 30 minutes later, the Australian chief returns, just over the moon, with a 10-point buck. He'd outdone the Norwegian. And again, the Texan was, you know, he was in disbelief. He said, "So how did you all get that buck?" And the Aussie said, "Well, it was fantastic. You know, I walked out about 250 yards, found some tracks in the snow, followed the tracks, and there he was." So the American was excited, grabbed his rifle, away he went. 30 minutes passed, 60 minutes passed, 90 minutes passed. Soon the American, there's a commotion on the front step, come through the door, and he was in terrible condition. He was battered, bruised, his clothing was askew, and the other chief said, "Oh my goodness, what happened to you?" And he said, it's unbelievable. I walked out about 300 yards, found a big, beautiful set of tracks, followed them around the corner, and I got hit by a train.
Last week, I finally decided to try the new Uber taxi service. So I jump in the back of the car, and asked the driver to take me to Northlands. He starts driving away, and then I tapped him lightly on the shoulder to ask him a question. He starts screaming. He loses control of the car. He jumps over the sidewalk. He comes this close to hitting a pedestrian. Finally, the car stops. Then he turns around and looks at me, goes, "What the hell are you doing?" I go, "What am I doing? I apologize, but I only tapped you lightly on the shoulder. I didn't mean to scare you." He says, "Well, maybe it's not all your fault." He says, "I've only been driving this car for a day. I was driving a funeral van for 25 years.
So there's a traveling salesman, and he's going along through rural Alberta, and his car breaks down. So he sees a farmhouse, and he goes over and asks the farmer if he can help him fix his car. And the farmer says, "Sure, I'll go get my tools." And then the salesman looks over into the farmyard, and he sees this pig with a wooden leg. And so he thinks, well, that's really interesting. And the farmer comes out, they fix the car, he's ready to go. And he says, "You know what, I'm really curious about your pig there. Why does it have a wooden leg?" And the farmer said, "That's a great pig. You know, one night our house caught on fire and the pig squealed so loud it woke up the whole family and we all got out safely. And then a few months later my tractor tipped over and it was going to crush me. It had me pinned down, and the pig came running over and used its snout, lifted up the tractor just enough that I could get out. It's a great pig." And the salesman said, "Well, that's great, that sounds amazing, but you know, why does a pig have a wooden leg?" And the farmer says, "Well, you know, with a pig that great, you don't want to eat them all at once."
This is my 6-year-old son's favorite joke. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Interrupting cow.
Interrupting.
Moo! Classic.